Honorable colleagues, we recall that on Thursday, 8 October 2020, the President, Commander-in-Chief of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Muhammad Buhari, in compliance with Section 81 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended, famously presented the national budget to authorize the issue from the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Federation the total sum of 13,082,420.568 billion naira only. In the words of Mr. President, the 2021 budget was prepared amidst a challenging global and economic domestic environment due to the persistent headwinds from the coronavirus pandemic. The resulting global economic recession, low oil prices, and heightened global economic uncertainty have had important implications for our economy. The Nigerian economy is currently facing serious challenges, with the macroeconomic environment being significantly disrupted by the coronavirus pandemic. Real domestic product GDP has declined by 6.1% in the second quarter of 2020. The prevailing economic problem occasioned by the coronavirus is further accentuated by the recent EndSARS protest, with so many government properties damaged during the crisis and now yearning for immediate attention. Also is the demand for police reform and better welfare package for the police force. Distinguished colleagues and our guests, we have serious problems in our hands, and this calls for collective and collaborative efforts from all stakeholders in our efforts to revamp and rebuild the Nigerian economy in the interest of the majority of Nigerian people and the future generation. As we do this significant and important national assignment of budget hearing, I call on you to bear the foregoing in mind for effective and result-oriented legislative impact by this committee. As we review the 2020 budget performance, it is instructive to note that the current global economic crunch against the backdrops of the 2021 estimates presented by Mr. President in such a way that we shall uphold the Constitution and also meet the expectations of the Nigerian people in line with the oath we took as members of the National Assembly. As a committee, our role of oversight will be more effective if we are able to have a real-time revenue monitoring system in place rather than the present approach of our post-mortem monitoring. As a parliament, it is our constitutional duty to consider the budget proposal estimates we may adopt and amend, and then take the best interest for Nigeria, the best decisions for Nigeria. Honorable colleagues, I call on you to be open-minded towards this budget hearing, and I pray that God will continue to bless Nigeria. Thank you, and God bless you.
Mr. Chairman has already quite eloquently given a very good background on the budget presentation that has already been made by His Excellency the President to the Parliament. Our country is facing an economic slowdown occasioned by COVID-19, and also occasioned by the crash in the crude oil price. The budget that was presented, titled the Economic Recovery and Resilience Budget, is a budget that we hope will support the economy to quickly come out of recession and reset the economy into the path of growth in 2021. I'm sure honorable members are very much aware that we have already witnessed the first negative growth of -6.1% in the second quarter of 2020. And it looks very much that the third quarter growth will also be a negative one. So we'll technically be going into our second recession in the last 4 years. Mr. Chairman and honorable members, let me just report globally on the performance of the 2020 budget. The budget parameters as approved by the National Assembly had key indicators. The first is that you had approved the budget with a benchmark price of $28 per barrel. The actual performance average January to September is $38.64. That's the average performance. The oil production was set in the revised 2020 budget at 1.8 million barrels per day. The actual average that we're reporting up to September is 1.76 million barrels per day. Exchange rate was passed at 360 naira to the US dollar. The average as at end of the rate as at end of September is 379 naira to the US dollar. Inflation is projected to be at 14.13% by the end of 2020. As of September, inflation is at 13.71%. GDP growth is projected to be a negative growth by the end of the year at minus 4.2%. At half year, the GDP growth is minus 2.18%. This gives us hope that the projection of the negative growth at 4.2% might be, we might do better than the 4.2% negative growth that has been projected. Mr. Chairman, honorable members, as at the end of the third quarter of 2020, federal government's available revenue, generated revenue for the budget, prorated, this is January to September, is 70% of the target. So this is 70% against the prorated target, not against the annual target. Federal government share of oil revenue was 1.10 trillion, and it represents 158%. So an overperformance of the budget. Why is this? Because we set the crude oil price at $28 and the performance averaged $37 per barrel. Company income tax performance was 79%, value-added tax was 64%, customs revenue was 78%. So considering the constraints that the country is going through in terms of economic slowdown, we'll say that the revenue performance is still a reasonably good one compared to what we were expecting. Other revenues did not perform as well as the other categories that I have earlier provided. On the expenditure side, the 2020 revised budget was a budget of 9.97 trillion. And this is including government-owned enterprise and project-tied loans. The actual performance was 7.09%. That is representing 94.7% of the prorated target for the year. On the expenditure side, 2.4 trillion was for debt service. 2.54 trillion was expended on debt service. 2.43 trillion was expended on personnel costs, including pensions. As of September, 873.9 billion has been released for capital, but by the end of October, this has gone up to 1.2 trillion at the end of October 2020. The global economic performance indicates that there will be a negative growth at the end of 2020 for the whole global economy, but that this negative growth will recover in 2021 from minus 4.4% to 5.2%. This is the global growth. In sub-Saharan Africa, the growth is also projected to be negative at minus 3% at the end of 2020, but to recover to 3.1% by 2021. In Nigeria, the IMF projected that Nigeria will contract by 4.3%. Our own National Bureau of Statistics projected that Nigeria will contract by 4.2%. So very, very, very close. And already you have seen the indication from the second quarter GDP report that has been released. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to speak briefly about the key performance parameters for the 2021 budget. The key parameters, as well as other macroeconomic projections driving the medium-term and expenditure framework, we have had to prepare them to be in line with emergent realities. So we set crude oil price for 2021 budget at $40 per barrel, oil production at 1.6 million barrels per day, exchange rate at 379 naira to the US dollar, and inflation we're projecting to come down to 11.97% by the end of 2021, with a GDP growth of 3%. So we're projecting to go into recession in 2020, but to come out of recession in 2021 and grow to 3%. Nigeria's total production of oil capacity is 2.5 million barrels per day. But the current production quota of IMF sets us, OPEC, sets us at 1.412 million barrels per day. So when you add the condensate, which is around 30,000 barrels per day, is how we now fix the 1.7 million barrels per day benchmark that is proposed in the 2021 budget. So the 2021 budget benchmark for crude oil production is 1.7 million barrels per day. World Bank forecasts that crude oil prices will rise to an average of $42 per barrel in 2021 to $44.5 per barrel in 2022. While the EAI expects that Brent crude, which is our own brand of crude, will average $41 per barrel during the second half of 2020 and move up to $50 per barrel during the year 2021. Inflation is expected to still be at double digit over 2020 as well as 2021. We hope that it will be nearer 10 at the end of 2021. Honorable Chairman and members, the aggregate revenue available to fund the 2021 budget, which Mr. President has presented at 13.3 trillion, the average revenue is 7.89 trillion naira, and this is 35% higher than the revised budget of 2020 that we're currently implementing. We will be providing this report and presenting. I hope every member has a copy, but if not, we'll be providing it during the course of today. We have, I just want to point out some of the new things that we did in the 2020 budget. We have brought in 60 government-owned enterprises in the national budget. Last year, or 2020, we brought in the first 10, but this 2021 budget, we have brought in 60 of this government. Why did we bring them? We brought them to promote transparency and accountability and comprehensiveness of the of the budget of the federal government of Nigeria. In aggregate, 34.1% of the projected revenue that we have in the budget is going to be coming still from the oil-related sources, while 65.9% will be from non-oil sources. What this is saying is that our budget is largely financed by non-oil, and that is a good story. Overall, the size of the budget is constrained because of lower revenue. Otherwise, we could have aspired to have more than the 13 trillion size of the budget. Honorable Chairman, I'd like to just stop here and move on to the specific Ministry of Finance budget, because your invitation appeared to be to defend the Ministry of Finance budget, but because you are the Finance Committee, I thought it was also important for us to start from the global overview. Unless if you're giving me time to continue.
Before you move on to the main budget of Ministry of Finance, let's see if any of our members have questions. These documents you made, we only have maybe 3 or 4 copies. And so our members will...
Okay, so we will be running copies as we're here, and then more will be distributed to the rest.
Other colleagues, any questions as it relates to 2020 performance?
My own is just a simple question. Based on your submission concerning the global performance, especially for the oil countries that have their rig, are we looking at, because based on your submission, you said 1.7 million barrels per day you based on. Are we looking at the situation where at the point of a sprint for every Nigerian, we can get the actual barrel that we're really, the oil rig are really doing per day? I think that will help us a lot. Instead of this 1.7, because there's no way. The way I'm seeing it, and many Nigerians, they are seeing it, is that you put a sales girl in a shop or a store, and she's the one telling you the actual amount she made per day, instead of maybe the auditor to come and cross-check. Is it possible for Nigeria to know how many barrels we are actually doing per day, and we are the determiner, not Shell, not all these oil companies that will be telling us that this is the amount they have taken from us every day? Are we looking at that? Thank you very much, ma'am.
My name is MANU SORO. I represent Darazo-Ganjua Federal Constituency. I'm from Bauchi State. Mr. Chairman, I have a question to the Minister regarding the implementation of the Stephen Oronsai report on the rationalization of MDS. How far have we gone in that regard? I can remember last year during the budget defense, this issue was raised in this committee room. So I want to ask the Minister, how far have we gone in that regard, considering that there is the dire need for the Nigerian nation to deploy cost-cutting measures to harness it is depleting revenues in the face of increasing expenditures. Number two, Mr. Chairman, I want to commend the Minister for returning this country to January to December budget cycle. This is a great achievement. I also want to say kudos to the presiding officers of the National Assembly for achieving this great feat. Thank you.
Our Minister, may we know precisely the capital budget in 2020, how much? What's the percentage release so far? What's the percentage funding so far? And do we expect further funding before the end of the year? You mentioned that, anyway, maybe, I think we'll get to 2021. We'll ask that question in 2021. Our Minister, please, you may respond.
Thank you very much. Let me thank the Honorable Chairman and members for the questions that you had raised. I was actually pausing to ask whether I could continue with the rest of the presentation, but the questions have led me to the second part of my presentation, so I will just respond. On the first question on the releases from the service-wide board, the question was releases not made for two items which were indicated as zero. For the first one being pension protection fund, and the second one being additional support for universities. That's the question, right? Yes. So starting with the second one, the additional support for universities, we have been having negotiations with ASU. At some point, the Senate President had intervened, and we have come to a landing on some disbursements that we needed to make. So part of them will be this, and then there's still more that they are asking for. Secondly, on the, and this is something we are going to be implementing in the next couple of days because the agreement has been finalized. On the pension protection fund, we also have a major exercise that we need to conduct with PENCOM in terms of reconciliation, because PENCOM's demand is that there is up to about 150 billion that is required by, for government to pay in terms of shortfalls over several years that have accrued on the pension fund. We have made some provisions in the 2021 budget. I think we provided, DG budget is not here, but I think we have about 120 billion provided in the 2021 budget. But we still need to sit down and agree with PENCOM before we disburse this first tranche that is provided already in the 2020. On the second question on why we have what we can do to be able to accurately report on the barrels that we produce. I believe the National Oil Company, the NNPC, and its regulator, DPR, actually has that capacity and that information. So the information we put in the budgets is provided to us by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. We check with NNPC and we also check with DPR. They have several tools that they use, and in the past they used to rely on information provided by the national oil companies. But our understanding now is that there has been significant improvement and they're able to measure at several points. But I can't tell you that they're measuring 100% at the wellheads. But I know that they're measuring at flow stations and at export terminals, and to some extent also at the wellheads, because they have now a network management center that is able to read some wells as they are producing, but it hasn't covered all the wells as it is, so it's improved. So the assessment is that the total capacity that we have in the country of all production capacity is 2.5 million barrels per day. But we're limited to provide only 1.7 in the budget because of our commitment to the OPEC with the OPEC quota. On the implementation of the Orosanya report, Mr. President has approved that the Orosanya report should be implemented and has directed the Secretary of the Government and the Head of Service working together as a committee to carry out that process. I'm aware that the Head of Service has started a review process because the report is dated. It's not current anymore. So they have to review it, update it. Since then, more agencies have come on stream, and the size of government has further increased. So there's a review process that is going on with the view of updating that report, and the essence is to cut down on the size of government by fusing some agencies and reducing the number of agencies that we have had to be carrying through on our national budgets. On the question on automation, you will see, Honorable, from the proposals of the budget of 2021, that the Ministry of Finance budget is largely about automation. So we're automating a number of our processes, not only as a core ministry, but also our agencies. FIRS, Customs are also automating their collection process, and we are beginning to see the result of those automations in terms of enhancing the efficiency of the revenue collecting agencies and also in blocking leakages. Over time, we've been implementing IPPIS to block leakages in terms of payroll. We've been implementing the Treasury Simple Account, which is meant to make sure that all government funds are aggregated through a single view. We've also been implementing the Government Integrated Financial Management System, GIFMIS, the platform with which all government agencies process their payments. These systems are being refined and upgraded. For example, the TSA doesn't cover foreign agencies that we have out of the country. So we're doing a process now to find how we can cover that aspect. And also, GIFMIS doesn't cover some of those government-owned enterprises, the 60 that I said we brought into the budget. These are just for ministries, departments, and agencies. So we're looking at how to make sure that those also are automated and linked up to the GIFMIS so that we have one view of government financial transactions. Currently, we have done an automation process that enables us to capture the revenue, but not on a real-time basis, the revenue that is reported by the revenue-generating agencies under a Presidential Committee on Revenue Reconciliation that is chaired by the DG Budget. So we have monthly reconciliation exercise of all the major agencies to confirm that the revenues as reported are complete, right up to checking with what has gone into the banking system. We have in the Ministry of Finance automated our tax expenditure function, which is the process by which we grant import duty waivers, and to allow qualifying agencies to benefit. We've automated that process from end to end. In the past, it used to be manual, and it can take anything from an average of 3 months to get an IDEC pass. Now you do it in a couple of days. We also have Project Lighthouse that has brought in data that we have been able to get from BVN to immigration to FRS customs and brought them onto a platform. It's helping us to track taxpayer information so that any agency or anybody that is owing the government, whether it is taxes they haven't paid or contracts that, commitments to government that have not been paid and have been reported as being owed, we're able to track them and stop any payment that government is supposed to do to them until they settle their obligations. So there are several things that we're doing. If you look at the details of the finance budget, there are upgrades that we're carrying through. There are also new automations that we hope, if the National Assembly passes our proposals, we'll be able to carry through in 2021. On the question regarding the activities on monitoring and remittances, the main function of the Ministry of Finance is to, one of our main functions is to track the performance of revenue generating agencies, track the remittances, and report to the government. The budget implementation process is also monitored by us. We produce a quarterly budget performance report. So if you check the website of the Budget Office and or the Ministry of Finance website linked to the Budget Office, you see quarterly budget performance report. The National Monitoring and Evaluation Department of the Ministry in the planning arm also has a national monitoring and evaluation system that conducts biannual monitoring and evaluation reviews of government's key programs and projects, and also writes reports in those regards. Let me respond now to the very important issue that has been raised by the chairman of the committee, Honorable FALEKE. The protest that has been going on in our country by the youths, it's a very, very disturbing development for all of us in government. I'm sure the parliament and the executive alike. And there are several government programs and projects that have been going on from the last administration to the current one. From President Muhammadu Buhari's first term, we set up the National Social Investment Program. The Parliament has been kind enough to pass the NSIP program in the first year at 500 billion, in the second year 500 billion, the third year 500 billion since 2016 have been provided for this program. So we have the N-Power, the Homegrown School Feeding Program, the Conditional Cash Transfer Program, and we have the report of the releases, which is supposed to be circulated regarding this programs. Summary of 2020 releases. Okay. So on that report, you will see what is appropriated in the revised budget for personnel is 2.99 trillion naira. What has been released is 2.42 trillion, and the balance yet to be released to the end of the year is 568 billion. The overhead has been released only from January to August. What was appropriated is 369 billion. What has been released today is 288 billion, and there's a balance of 80 billion, representing 78.28%. The capital expenditure has been, so this is MDA capital, ministries, agencies, and departments capital is 1.34 trillion. What has been released, this is as at September, is 864 billion, and there's a balance of 484 billion, representing 64.13%. But there's also a capital supplementation, which is capital in the service-wide vote of 615 billion, out of which 249 billion has been released, representing 40.6%. There's a statutory transfers, which is 428 billion, out of which 395 billion has been released, representing 92.8%. Also in the budget is the service-wide vote for recurrent, which is appropriated at 1.2 trillion, and the releases is 845 billion, representing 69.7%. So the aggregate performance of the budget is 72.74%, and this is as at September 2020. So your specific question on the social intervention, the same report, but the last page. The last page, there's a GIFMIS report that shows that so far what has been released to the National Social Investment Program is 279.10 billion naira. The subsequent pages shows the summary of the releases. The next page is for personnel. It shows what has been released on a month-by-month basis from January to October. Then we have the releases of overhead, what has been released from January to August. And then the capital releases and the list of releases per ministry, department of an agency is also indicated, showing the Appropriation Act, the amount released in about 4 tranches, and the balances that are yet to be released. Then after that, we have the detailed releases under the capital supplementation. So there's a list of all the items that are under the service-wide budget, the amount in the revised budget, the total release, and the balance that is outstanding to be released. So again, for the National Social Investment Program, the last item, the last page, what has been released is 279 billion, representing 81.6% of the budget. The Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning. What we have presented as proposals for the consideration of the Parliament is a personnel budget of 1.647 billion naira, an overhead budget of 1.370 billion. But let me check whether, so it's this document I'm speaking to, this document, page 9. Is this page 9? Yes. Page 9. I'm on page 9 of this document. Overhead is 1.370 billion and capital is 4.005 billion. That's the global summary. At page 10, we're just showing the committee some projects that are funded by development partners and reported as under the budget of the Ministry of Finance. So we have 221.441 billion as under the Ministry of Finance budget. And these are programs that are, the first two are World Bank funded programs. They're called the SIFTers. They are, and then the Development Bank of Nigeria 126, there is also a World Bank funded program. So these are funds that are with the bank, and they are released to the implementing agencies. Ministry of Finance is only coordinating, so it doesn't come to the Ministry of Finance. They're disbursed, for example, the SIFTers program is disbursed to states after they achieve some key performance indicators. So the monies don't come to the ministry, but for the purpose of completeness of reporting, we decided that from last year and including this year, we're reporting all loans that are being disbursed and putting them under the agencies that is supervising those disbursements. So at page 11, it just shows you what was submitted. Again, this is salaries and including pensions for the ministry. The grand total is, as reported earlier, 1.647 billion. Then from page 12 to page 17, we have the line-by-line proposal for the overhead budget of the ministry. So this is page 12, page 13, 14, 15, 16, and 17. The total overhead is 1.370 billion naira, covering the various categories of overhead expenditure as detailed in pages 12 to page 17. Then at page 18 to page 25, we have listed the line-by-line details of the capital proposals of the Ministry of Finance, Budget, and National Planning. So if you look at page 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and 25. The details, the line-by-line details of the capital proposal for the ministry. At page 26 to page 29 is the budget as is set out, the proposed 2021 budget as is set out, starting from salaries right through to recurrent overhead expenditure and to capital. So at page 28, you will see the list of the capital expenditure right through to page 29. So, Honorable Chairman and honorable members, the budget for the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning for 2021 is as presented from page 9 right through to page 28. The personnel budget at 1.647 trillion, overhead at 1.370 trillion, capital at 4.005 trillion, the ministry and its agencies. Thank you, Honorable Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable colleagues, you heard the presentation of 2021. If you have questions, please send the mics work. Your table mic is on. Any question by any member?
The recent do I call it, I will not call it outburst, but the recent agitation across the land. And when we talk about the youth in Nigeria, I am the chairman, House Committee on Youth Development. We find out that about between 60 and 65% of the population of Nigeria are youth. And this government, Muhammadu Buhari's government, is the government that in Nigeria, in the history of Nigeria, that has gone ahead to have a lot of safety valves for Nigerian youths in different spheres, different programs and projects for the youths. But sadly enough, we find out that majority of these programs, they do not emanate or they are not being anchored by the Ministry of Youth that are supposed to understand the youths. And so the benefits of this do not go directly to the youths at times. For example, there are many programs of government whereby they need youths maybe between the ages of 18 and 35. And those people that access these programs or projects are even above that age because there's no way of checking. Because the ministry that is in charge of youth development in Nigeria is not even directly connected. And again, when we look at 2020-2021 budget, we find out that the Ministry of Youth Development is one of the ministries that gets the least allocation. And we want to develop the youth. Are we walking our talk? Are we walking our talk? Are we sincere about youth development in Nigeria? Are we trying to initiate another opportunity for another SORO?
Finance questions. Finance questions.
These are
finance questions.
Oh, these are finance questions because it is about money. Thank you. When we talk about budget,
honorable colleagues, please ask finance questions, please.
Yes.
If you want to talk about youth development, ask the youth minister.
Yes. Yes, we have asked finance questions. The finance questions there is that when we are allocating. Yes.
Finance purely.
Well.
The first question that was asked is why we removed 100 billion provision for Mambila power project. I understand you said that this was indicated by the Ministry of Power. So let me just inform this meeting that the Ministry of Finance, Budget and National Planning, based on the MTEF that you have passed, put in the core circular the budget size or ceiling for every ministry, department, and agency. And they're expected to now do their budget within that ceiling. The details of the budget is uploaded by each ministry using the GIFMIS platform. So it's not provided by the Ministry of Finance. We provide the guidance of the ceilings. We monitor to make sure that the ceilings are not exceeded, but they provide the line-by-line details. So the ministers and the agencies know what their priorities are, and they're the ones to indicate. So if the Minister of Power didn't have Mambila in their submission, it is because they didn't provide it. We do not provide the programs that go into the budget for the ministries. That's their responsibility. Secondly,
so if I understand what you said,
yes,
the Minister of Power did not see Mambila as a priority, and that's why it is not included in their budget.
We can provide to you what the input that they have made.
We will appreciate
in the process of the budget, after the circular, they will submit the budget. We review, we do a budget defense process, and then they take our observations, and then they now update what they submitted. So we're not the ones that do the inputs in the budget. So the good thing is that GIFMES is a automation platform. It has an audit trail. At any point in time, you will see who has done what activity. So I don't know whether the Minister of Power didn't understand what the process was, and that's why he was making that claim. On the police service reforms, the review of the police service reforms we know is ongoing by the National Salaries and Wages Commission, and we've actually contemplated this as well. And what we're hoping is that the review will be completed quickly enough so that while the appropriation process is going on, that the revised salaries are included in the 2021 appropriation. If it's not completed, then we'll have to contemplate doing an amendment or a supplementary, but I do hope that we'll be able to push the Wages Commission to be able to complete this quickly so that it is taken on into the 2021 budget while the process is still going on. And on the question on what mechanisms do we have in place to ensure that provisions that are made in the budget reach the citizen, we have, from the ministry's perspective, a National Monitoring and Evaluation Department. We also have a budget department that has a monitoring and evaluation function. But the real responsibility of monitoring the implementation of the project on a day-to-day basis is that of the project owner. Because our own monitoring is periodic. Just like the National Assembly oversight is periodic, our own monitoring is also periodic. So the National Social Investment Program, for example, has a monitoring component, a unit that is responsible for monitoring all the 4 clusters on a continuous basis, and we all have a collective responsibility to make sure that the programs work as designed. On the question about the youth programs. I know that the current Minister of Youth and Sports has been working collaboratively with several agencies. So the last time we did our ministerial performance report, he had shown collaboration with about 7 different ministries that is working. There is no agency in government today that has any major program that it implements from end to end. There always has to be some collaboration. Recently, the Federal Executive Council approved a new National Youth Investment Fund, a fund of 75 billion naira, out of which we have provided 25 billion for the first year in the 2021 budget, and we've also been mandated to raise part of the funds to start the program in 2020. So at least 12.5 of that will be provided in 2020. The ministry collaborates with communications and digital economy, with women affairs, with trade and investment, even with finance, and with the central bank and several other ministries. Over time, maybe these things will all come together and we can evolve into designing collectively. Because right now what we're just trying to do is to just implement together. But if we design together and implement together, then we'll reach the goal of being able to better provide for our youth. On the current protest that is going on across the country and the information that my sister, the Honorable, has provided that there are vacancies all across institutions. Yes, it might be so, but I haven't got the data, that is one. Secondly, the directive we have is to implement the Orosanya report, which means downsize the size of government. When COVID-19 happened, we have also been directed to stop employment. Why? Because we are not able to keep paying even the current size of salaries that we have. So when you look closely at the budget performance report, you'll find that our average monthly revenues is taken over completely by salaries and pensions. And in good months, maybe it pays part of the overhead. So while it is desirable to employ more people into the service, you have to make sure that you're able to pay the salary, not just this month, but on a sustainable basis. What we're doing, on the other hand, by creating different pockets of funds for youth, for small, medium-sized enterprises, is to create entrepreneurs of our people so that they own their businesses, run them on a manner that is successful and sustainable, and employ people. Government cannot and should not continue to be the largest employer of labor. We must collectively work together to develop the small, medium enterprises. That is the only way in which our economy can grow in a manner that is sustainable. Thank you, Mr. Honorable Chairman.
Year in, year out, we are referred to as a consumption country. Yes, I know that efforts are on as to ensure that the impediments towards production are being addressed, i.e. power. I saw a video where an American was making a presentation, and that man said that the reasons why they don't want Africa to grow is because if Africa grows, they will be in trouble. And they only need Africa as a source of raw material, not to allow them to produce. Honourable Minister, my question is this. Why are we not making conscious efforts? I use the word conscious efforts to ensure that Nigeria comes back to a production country rather than a consumption country. I.e., we know that the bank's interest rates are so high for the industries to survive, 28–30%. I also know that the National Assembly at various times you have brought in requests for loan to construct roads, infrastructures. But I'm sure these roads don't produce anything. Why can't we make conscious efforts at borrowing funds at single-digit interest rates to support industries, call it manufacturing sector borrowing, to borrow funds and list maybe about 100 companies in Nigeria, 100 privately owned companies in Nigeria, sign agreement with them and borrow money on their behalf, the same way we borrow money to construct bridges and roads, so that by so doing we will become a manufacturing company and will become less consumption. Honourable Minister, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, in the last round of questions, you asked a question relating to page 21 of this report that we presented. The acquisition of some softwares, which included establishment of a debt recovery platform to enable us recover debts by government. So earlier on, as I was explaining about what we're doing on automation, I did say we have the Project Lighthouse, which is consolidating data from different sources to help us recover debts that are owned by government. So if a company is paying taxes, we're able to block payments to that company on GIFMIs until their taxes are cleared. We have run it on a pilot basis within the ministry, but we need to extend the availability of Project Lighthouse to some key MDAs and also to states that have expressed interest of wanting to use this. In the pilot, we were able to put property data from 2 states, and the states have found it useful and they also want to be linked up to it. So we want to expand the data sources that are brought on Project Lighthouse and also to be able to interface with some MDAs, some key MDAs, and some states that have expressed interest. The second one, also the ERP that is required to automate the FALEKE operations to optimize its efficiency, is to service the federation account, so the account that we manage for the whole of the nation, as opposed to the federal government alone. And that is being led by the Office of the Minister of Finance as well as the Accountant General of the Federation. This is not yet done, so it's a new project, whereas the first one, there's a live project that we just want to upgrade and expand. Let me now turn to the questions that were asked on the second round. The discussions that we have had with ASU has resulted in ASU developing an alternative platform to IPPIS, which they are calling UTAS, and we're very happy about that, because UTAS is now a locally developed platform that has the potential of serving the functions that IPPIS is doing. But it's a pilot, it's a sample, it's going through technical reviews by NITDA and the Ministry of Communications. The essence of this review is to make sure that it will be interoperable with other government IT investments and that the security will be adequate. If it works out well, then we can look at how UTAS can be used in the first instance for the whole of the university system, and subsequently maybe even expanded. It will now relieve us of the need to keep partnering with some other external companies using this IPPIS, which is an external system. But IPPIS, the way it is right now, is robust, is working very well. The university system resisted coming on it, but we have at least 50% of the tertiary institutions already on IPPIS. The others that refuse to come on it, we have not been paying their salaries, because the president directed that every government employee that is being paid by government funds must be on the IPPIS. And our discussions with ASU is that you join the IPPIS when the alternative that you are developing is working and is assessed to be okay, we migrate you. So we haven't reached to that point of migration yet, because the tool that they the platform that they developed is still undergoing review. I think the question was being asked was how much was ASU being paid and how much would we be saving. It's premature, but just to say that the whole of government payroll, 30% of it is payment to tertiary institutions. So that's a very large and significant proportion, and that's why we insist that this coming onto IPPIS must be done, because it's a very large proportion of government expenditure on payroll. On the discussion on the banking interest rates, let me say, I didn't quite get what it is. Exchange interest, no, he said, is it, okay, exchange rate. So the 2020 original budget was done at 305. COVID happened. We have had to adjust the exchange rate to bring it to current realities. The value of the naira at that exchange rate of 305 was not reflective of the true value of the naira. But the advantage of this 360 that we moved into was that we ended up having more naira at FALEKE, and it reduced the deficit that we were expecting, enabling us to manage better despite the huge decline in oil revenue. So it is a practical step that we needed to take. Every country had to take measures like the ones that we had taken, and also the CBN following the commitment we made while we were doing negotiations with different multilateral institutions, also committed to working towards a unified exchange rate. And as a result of that, in August, they moved to the I&E window. So all federal government, all expenditure of foreign exchange is now done at the I&E window rate, which is also a market-driven rate. So it's a double-edged sword. You gain more naira, but then also your expenditure goes up. But that's your reality. You cannot continue to maintain a rate that is not realistic, and we adjusted to reality. On the issue of the import duty waiver, we actually have a national fiscal policy committee that is currently reviewing our fiscal policy. And one of the things that the president announced was that the 2020 budget was going to be accompanied by a tax expenditure framework. Tax expenditure are things like pioneer starters and import duty, because those are revenues that we're waiving. So we're classifying them as tax expenditure. We're concerned about the levels, but we are also trying to introduce a check that in any particular year you have forecasted and budgeted what the limits of your tax expenditure is. So we're working on that tax expenditure framework. Hopefully we'll be able to get it into the process during this appropriation process. If not, it can come back to the Parliament later. The Fiscal Responsibility Act does provide directives on remittances, but I thought the question was asked on the background of whether ASU does universities do remittances. Universities are not part of the institutions that are listed under the Fiscal Responsibility Act to remit operating surpluses, but they generate IGR, and they're expected to manage their funding very well and to report on the IGR. They're not expected to generate and spend at the same time, but they're not part of the agencies that are expected to remit operating surplus as provided for by the Fiscal Responsibility Act. On Honorable FALEKE, I think it's up to all of us to actually work together to make sure that we are currently carrying through policies, programs, and plans that will ensure that Nigeria returns to true productivity. And we have made an attempt under the the Economic Sustainability Plan by making some provisions. I'll just give an example in respect of agriculture. There's a part of the ESP includes a provision to bring in 20,000 to 100,000 hectares of land per state into production, and also to build roads that will provide, so rural roads that will provide access for the farmers to move their goods from market to, from farms to market. That will reduce post-harvest losses, and in the same time, it means we're actually increasing productivity because our post-harvest losses have been placed at an average of 50%. So if you're simply able to assist the farmer to move his goods to market, it means he's retaining more value by as much as 50% of what he's previously losing. But we also need to do more in several sectors of the economy, and the ESP has 2 of such provisions. So you are saying also, why don't we borrow for improving industry? We have before Parliament a request for approval for a loan that we call the Green Imperative Program, which is a loan of $1.2 billion from the Brazilian government, and is meant for government to borrow, to on-lend to tractor assembly plants, to on-lend to businesses that will set up processing centers at senatorial level as well as at local government level. So federal government is the borrower, but the whole of the facility is for on-lending at different levels. It's a program that is addressing the whole of the agricultural value chain, from mechanization right down to production and processing and selling. So it's meant to be like that. And also, in the last borrowing plan that you passed, there was a loan from African Development Bank for enhancing agricultural production. That is also meant for on-lending to small, medium enterprises.